Hi everyone. Today I want to talk about keeping things fresh in our somatic movement practice, why that is a good thing and how we can do it. And when I say it's a good thing, I actually mean it is an essential thing. So, for those of you who don't know, somatic movement releases muscle tension that we hold habitually, so below the level of our conscious awareness. And that muscle tension might cause pain, causes sort of certain postural changes, it reduces our freedom of movement, it reduces our available energy, all sorts of things, right? And so we get into releasing the muscles through somatic movement by getting into the sensory motor feedback loop in our brains to make changes in terms of how we sense what is going on in our soma, our living body as we experience it, and we make changes to how we move our somas. So essentially this means that our movement that we do in somatic movement affects our sensations and the other way round. So we move to sense and we sense to move, okay? But we need to be moving in novel ways and with awareness, which also means going slowly because our brains are not very good at noticing detail when things are happening too fast, right? So we have to move in novel ways with awareness in order to change what is going on in our brains, so that we can release the muscle tension that is holding us back from living our fullest life, right? Now, moving in novel ways can mean one of two things. Firstly, it could be doing lots of different movements. So getting variety in terms of the actual movements that you choose to do in your somatic movement practice, and there is a vast number of movements you can do. Excuse me. Addressing everything from the big muscles in the center of your soma right out to your fingers and your toes and even your facial muscles, your jaw, things like that. I'm going to have a little sip of drink. Don't know what's happened to my throat. Bad timing. Anyway, so lots of different movements that we can do, and there is a lot to be said for bringing in new movements to your practice. Sometimes a new movement comes in and it just kind of hits the spot, right? Just lands for you, just gets into that exact sort of point in your soma that you're really sort of looking to target, right? But it is not the only way that we bring novelty to our practice, not by any means. And this second way that we bring in novelty, variety into our practice is probably even more effective and essential than just doing lots of different movements and varying your practice that way. And that is to bring in variety to each individual movement in and of itself. So, what does that mean? Well, for example, if you have done any somatic movement at all, you will almost certainly be familiar with the arch and flatten, which is the very sort of bread and butter foundational movement in somatics. I'll link to it below so you can give it a try if you haven't already. But if what we do is we go, oh yes, I'm going to do some arch and flatten, and we just repeat the same movement in exactly the same way each time, we will not be getting into that sensory motor feedback loop, and we won't be making changes in terms of how the brain controls the muscles. And therefore, we will not get the muscle release that we are seeking. And I'm really hoping you can't hear what's going on outside. It's all happening today. Somebody's having some gardening work done, I think. Anyway, so we want to get into that sensory motor feedback loop. We do not want to just do a movement over and over in a habitual way. So when we're doing something like our arch and flatten, which most of us who've practiced for any length of time are going to be quite familiar with, we can bring in variety to stop the movement getting stale. So here are some examples of ways that we can tweak our arch and flatten to change it up a little bit, get new information, learn something new, and make changes at the level of the nervous system to release muscle tension. So arch and flatten is all about rolling the pelvis. You're lying on your back, you're rolling the pelvis down towards the feet, up towards the head, okay? So one thing we can do is we can turn our head to one side or tilt our head to one side and then do the arch and flatten with that head position. And then we can try it on the other side, come back to center, see what we learn. We can flip the breathing cues. So we normally inhale as we arch and we exhale as we flatten. Okay, so we could switch that round, breathing in as we flatten and exhaling as we arch. It's difficult even to say for me. Okay, because it's a good switch up, right? It changes things up. Another thing you can do is, rather than think of I'm going to roll my pelvis, we might start from a different point in our soma. So I might say, well, what if I press my head back into the floor? Oh, my ribs lift a little bit and my back arches a little bit. Yeah, so we can start from somewhere different and it will change the information that you get and therefore lead to you being able to make changes. You can do other things like making the movement bigger or smaller. You can pause part way through on the contraction or on the release. You could pause halfway through the release and then go, oh, actually, I'm going to go back into it again. You can get into a certain position, sort of at the top of the contraction, and then go, oh, from here, maybe I'm going to adjust my head position. What does that give me? How does that change the muscle contraction that I'm sensing? Okay, so all of these things give us a chance to move our soma in a different way and a chance to sense something new as we move, which gives us a chance to move differently, which gives us a chance to sense differently, which gives us a chance to move differently. Right? You see where I'm going with this? So when I'm teaching, I sometimes use the term painting by numbers, because what we want to do is avoid automatizing the movements that we know. If I say arch and flatten and you go, oh yeah, I know that one, arch, flatten, that's not what it's about, right? Painting by numbers is fantastic, what fun, right? But if we want to develop our painting skill, then that's probably not going to be the way to do it. We're going to go off and experiment and make mistakes and, try out different things. That's how we're going to develop our skill in painting. So so that's what we want to be doing. We want to bring in that variety, that sort of sense of curiosity and exploration as we are doing our practice. Okay, so we get into habits in our soma, right? And some of these habits are very, very useful. Some of the postures that we hold, some of the movements that we are able to do. Imagine you play, for example, the violin, and you are holding your violin in this way, and this is a posture you want to be able to get into easily. If you tried to switch your violin to the other side, you'd be like, oh, how do I even hold it, right? You'd be there all day. So we do want those habitual postures or habitual movements. However, what we don't want is to get stuck in them. Imagine if you play the violin and then you finish and you kind of go, oh no, I can't move my arm, right? And that seems absolutely ridiculous in and of itself. But if you think about something like being at the computer and how we sort of hunch forwards a little bit, no judgment, we live in this computerized world, right? We hunch forward a bit, we have hands in front of us, shoulders come in, chin probably sticks out. So our red light reflex posture, for those who know that term. When you're there, the more you do that, actually, when you finish on the computer, the harder it is to come back to a more sort of balanced, central, easy posture, right? And maybe we then start getting tension headaches or back pain or whatever. So we're trying to notice those habitual postures or habitual ways of movement, get that back into our conscious awareness so we can change it. We cannot change what we can't sense, okay? So how do we get a little bit more variety into our practice? And I think particularly if you're a little bit earlier on the path, you know, as you get more experience, you can lie yourself down on the floor, you do an arch and flatten, and then you sort of say to yourself, well, what shall I do to shape that up a bit today? Or what do I want to explore today? So one thing that has massively helped me has been attending a regular class. And you can do that by recordings, you can do that by live classes, whatever it might be, in person, online, whatever suits you. There are always new movements coming in, or variations on movements, or cues that the teacher gives that either I don't remember, haven't heard before, or just sort of didn't land for me a few weeks ago or whatever, right? And all of that helps me to keep my practice fresh. And yeah, sometimes, you know, you're just not ready for that movement or that element of that movement or that cue. So actually coming back to it in a future class, even though it's a repetition, that might be just the moment where you're like, now I can do that. You know, now I can bring that in. So keeping it fresh by literally having more opportunities to try things out with different movements, different cues, different ways of doing things. And then if you're doing your own practice outside of class, maybe you're not working through recording, you're at that stage where you're like, I know a few movements, I can get down on the floor and kind of start. You can start to sort of generate your own explorations. So some things which have really helped me, always coming to my practice with beginner's mind. So trying to avoid any sort of assumptions about my soma, how it feels, what it can do, where the tension is on any given day. And that way I can be open to any sensations and experiences as they arise in my practice. Another thing is going into movement and coming out of movement slowly. We have a tendency to go, okay, I'm doing the middle part slowly, but I've sort of wanged myself into it, slowed it down a bit to do the middle bit, and then sort of flopped off at the end, right? So going slowly at those beginnings and ends of the movement is really helpful. I am much better now at when I get to a point where I go, oh, there's something there, there's something interesting, maybe I can, there's a bit of tension there, you know, what's going on there? At that point, we can then start to go, well, can I adjust my position somewhat to kind of get into that? Or can I adjust the intensity of what I'm doing or the speed of the movement? What's going to help me the most to find out something new or do something differently to get into that sort of very specific spot to pandiculate the muscles, contract, release, and then take a moment. I'll put that video in as well about what pandiculation is. Pausing between the movements, doing a brief check-in, that's really, really helpful. Where am I now, right? Making no assumptions. Choosing the next movement as I go. So I'll often start with arch and flatten and then say, okay, that's kind of highlighted this. This is the movement that is going to help me with that, right? Depending on what shows up on any given day, and that's going to vary. And an invitation you can bring yourself in your practice is, can I notice something new? So on any given repetition, even of a familiar movement, can I notice something new? So just some ideas to get you started to open up your thinking a little bit on how you approach your practice. So somatic movement brings us ongoing progress. It kind of peels back the layers of our ability to move freely and comfortably. No matter how long we've been doing our practice, there is always something new to learn that will help us move better, as long as we do not fall into that kind of painting by numbers, repetition, habitual sort of trap. We want to keep our practice fresh and variable and novel. Okay, you've got some ideas on how to try that. I hope it helps. Happy moving, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.